Well, good evening. What a beautiful time of worship. Can we just thank the Lord for the band? Thank you. Well, tonight I want to talk about Gandalf. I want to talk about the Olympics, California mudslides, and that time that I walked through an active minefield. Let me start by asking you a few questions. What's one of the most foolish things that you've ever done? Don't say it out loud. What are some of the wisest things that you've ever done? When you think of people who are foolish, what makes them foolish? And when you think of people who are wise, what makes them wise? Well, this morning I began by talking about the holy island of Lindisfarne. You remember? I mentioned the wooden posts that are on the mud flats to guide us when things become unclear and the waters rise and it becomes dark. And we looked at wooden post number 1 this morning, the idea of moving from the prepositions of doing ministry for God to what does it mean to do ministry with God, the with God life. That we remain in the vine, right? That the best thing that you can do during your time here at Gordon is to learn to abide. And to truly abide means that we stop striving. And as Jesus said, apart from me, you can do nothing. Well, tonight I want us to look at post number 2 in the water. What does it look like? And here's post number 2. What does it look like to pursue a life of godly wisdom as a college student? Now, when you hear that, I don't know what your first reaction is. When I've shared this with college students, they have admitted to me, they say, when I hear that, I think that's kind of an old person topic. Right? Talk about wisdom, really? You couldn't think of something more exciting? And the truth is, I am an old person. And I know it seems impossible right now, but one day you will be an old person too. Now, I knew I was getting old when 2 things happened. I didn't want to admit I was kind of an old person, but I knew it happened one day when I realized my hair was thinning. I was driving a minivan, and I just used the word poopy in a sentence seriously with my 2-year-old. That's when I knew I was getting old. But when I really knew I was getting old was a few years ago. I opened a gift from my younger brother for Christmas, and I opened it up, and it was an ear and eyebrow and nose hair trimmer. But it wasn't just that I got that, is that I opened up, and my first thought was, this is exactly what I wanted. And my brother said, you are so old. But I want you to know that wisdom isn't just for old people. Wisdom, I think, is best embodied when it starts young. A few years ago, I asked a room full of college students, I said, when you think of a wise person, who comes to mind? And they gave me 3 answers. The first one they said was Gandalf. Kind of a cool answer. The second answer they gave was their grandmother, which I thought was a good answer. And the third that they mentioned was the thinker statue. You know, the Rodin thinker statue. And it hit me. I thought of all the examples, and this was a room of a couple hundred, and only 3 examples were given, and I realized that 2/3 of the examples aren't even real. We don't have many compelling models of wisdom in our culture today. You want me to do anything on my pack here? I can use a handheld if that's easier. Can you do that? Great. Great, thank you. So I realized that of those 3 examples, out of a few hundred college students, that 2/3 of them weren't even real. And I thought, we don't have many models that exist in our culture today
when it comes to wisdom. Now, here's the thing I want you to know. If you forget everything that I say, if you fall asleep from here on out tonight, I want to leave you with this. You will never regret the intentional pursuit of godly wisdom. You will never regret the pursuit of godly wisdom, of being intentional in that pursuit as well. Intentionally pursuing wisdom is the best possible way for you to invest your one and only life, not just as a college student here at Gordon, but your entire life. Now, here's one problem. We live in a culture that doesn't believe this. Our culture not only undervalues the pursuit of wisdom, but it celebrates foolishness. So you may be saying, okay, wisdom, like who has it? Who has wisdom? So when you think of someone who's wise, what made them wise? What did they do to become a wise person? Well, author and psychologist Henry Cloud said there are three types of people in the world: those who are wise, those who are foolish, and those who are evil. And he said, pursue relationships with the wise, avoid foolish people, and run from those who are evil. Pretty good life lesson to live by. I've made some pretty foolish decisions in my lifetime. One of the great joys of my life is I had a chance to study in the fall of 1999 in Jerusalem, living right on Mount Zion at Jerusalem University College. And I'm grateful to be able to serve on the board of JUC now. But when I was a student there, we were up near the Sea of Galilee with a few of my roommates. It was one weekend, we were having fun, we were getting a little bored. We were up near the Golan Heights. If you know anything about the Golan Heights, in the war in the 60s, that was a zone there that, you're supposed to stay out of even today. That was filled with active minefields all over the place up in the Golan Heights. And of course, my roommates and I looked at each other and they said, wouldn't it be really fun if we just ran through the minefield? And I'm not very proud of that because all the warning signs and all the barbed wire everywhere, and there's some picture out there somewhere of us running through the minefield with a thumbs up. And I just remember at the time thinking it was really funny and later realizing that could have totally blown off my leg or ended my life. Now, I don't know about you in terms of foolishness, but in that moment of thinking that would be fun, I was not able to see long-term the consequences of what that could have happened. And by God's grace, we were spared, but I'm not very proud of that. One of the things about wisdom is keeping a long-term perspective. What was it that I'm really after? I love the songs that we sang. Because the songs that the worship team just helped lead us through is an eternal perspective, not a perspective of what's cool now or what's going to make me feel good tomorrow or next week, but it's this eternal perspective of wisdom. So you may say, okay, well, wisdom, like what is it? What is it? Here's my definition of wisdom, is doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. Doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And because wisdom is so undervalued in our culture today, there are several prevailing myths. And here are several myths that stand out. Number one is it's the same thing as being smart. That if you're really smart, then you just must be really wise. Honestly, I know lots of smart people who are actually quite foolish. I actually know some wise high school and college students. One of the wisest people I ever met was illiterate. Now, sometimes there's an overlap, but that's not the same thing. The second myth that we often think about is that the only way you grow wise is to grow old. Oh, I'll just get wise when I'm in my 40s or 50s. But I love when I meet young adults who are wanting to take wisdom seriously now. Another myth is this, that you're either born with wisdom or you're not. You either got it in your genes or you didn't. Sometimes God gives charisms or gifts of his Spirit to people, and wisdom being one of them, but that wisdom can always be developed over time. You don't have to major in philosophy to be able to grow in wisdom during your time here at Gordon. And that pursuing wisdom, growing in wisdom, is something you can do no matter your major, no matter what year you are. That when we are pursuing God, one of the things that I think he hardwires into us when we're hungry for God is that we hunger for his ways, which in the process we become wise. Here's another big one in our culture. Wisdom equals boredom. Now, that sounds so boring. Who wants to pursue that? This is part of the lie that the culture says is you have to have fun, you have to live it up, and the only way you can have fun is to do foolish things. If it makes you happy, do what makes you feel what feels right. Just live by your impulses, live by your urges, live by your preferences, live by your glands, live by your hormones. But pursuing wisdom is the richest, most fulfilling, most satisfying, most meaningful life that you could ever live. There's another myth that you can just acquire it passively. It just kind of happens by osmosis. I've never met a single person that when you ask them, how did you get wise? They go, I don't know. I just woke up one day and I was brilliant and I was wise. No one floats and drifts into a life of deep wisdom. It's always an intentional pursuit for that to happen in your life. And then lastly, one of the big myths in our culture today is that worldly wisdom, the way the world defines wisdom, is the same thing as the way God defines wisdom. Some of you say, what's the difference? Well, worldly wisdom elevates human wisdom to a level where God is unneeded. But godly wisdom requires humility that acknowledges that on my own I know nothing, and as we looked at this morning, I can do nothing. Now, why is wisdom so significant and valuable? And this is where we're going to dig into Scripture here tonight. Now, I really want to challenge you with this, students. If you don't believe me that pursuing wisdom is the best way to invest your one and only life, then I dare you to find an older godly person who has pursued wisdom intentionally and regrets it. I dare you. And I don't believe you're ever going to find someone that says, I intentionally pursued godly wisdom my whole life, and I have so many regrets because of it. I've sat with so many leaders who actually have the opposite. They have so many regrets for all the foolish things that they did in their life. Now, Proverbs is a great book, extremely practical when it comes to wisdom. So I want to encourage you to click to or turn to Proverbs chapter 3. I want to look at a little bit of Proverbs 3, a little bit of Proverbs 4 tonight. One of the things I just love about the Proverbs is the value that wisdom is placed on it. In fact, when I read Proverbs 3 and 4, there are many times that I'm kind of caught off guard with how much the writer of Proverbs values wisdom. I'm going to bounce around a little bit here in terms of reading from Proverbs 3. And some of this you're going to find familiar. We sang some of these lyrics here just a moment ago, actually. You've probably heard this starting in verse 5 of chapter 3. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. But in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. And then skipping over to verse 13. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Those who lay hold of her will be blessed. Verse 21, my son, preserve sound judgment and discernment. Do not let it out of your sight. They will be life for you, an ornament to grace your neck. Think about that for a moment. In the time where this was written, in the known world at the time, the most valuable thing were gold and silver and rubies. What is that today? I don't know. Fill in the blank. Whatever you believe is the most valuable thing in the whole world, we could translate today and say that is how valuable wisdom is. Let me pause here like I asked this morning and say, students, do you believe that? You may say, wisdom's a good idea. I like wisdom. Yeah, wisdom, we should value it. But more precious than rubies? Greater than gold and silver? Are you kidding me? That's a lot of value that we're learning about here. That a God-centered life, a with God life, involves an intentional pursuit of wisdom. Now look in chapter 4, verse 5 there. It says, get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or swerve from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. Wisdom is supreme. Therefore, get wisdom. Though it costs you all you have, get understanding. Esteem her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will set a garland of grace on your head and present you with a crown of splendor. Verse 13, hold on to instruction. Do not let it go. Guard it well, for it is your life. And then over to verse 20. My son, pay attention to what I say. Listen closely to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them and health to one's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. It's pretty high priority and value put on wisdom. She is more profitable than silver, yields better returns than gold, and is more precious than rubies. Gold, silver, rubies. Get wisdom, though it costs you all that you have. Pursue it. Proverbs seems to reveal that the major components of the litmus test of whether you're wise or foolish is determined in how you steward what you have in front of you. One of the things that as I've been exploring and journeying through Proverbs is this, that wisdom is body-oriented. It's not some ethereal thing way up here, that wisdom is what you do with your body. You'll be foolish or you will be wise by what you do with your body. It's tangibly expressed in very physical form. I mean, it may be obvious here, but let me make some obvious statements. You can't act or behave or feel or speak or do anything outside of the physical body that God has given to you. So therefore, whether you're foolish or you're wise will depend on what you do with your body parts. In fact, I want to challenge you with something. If you are serious about this, take the book of Proverbs, and every time you read about a body part in the book of Proverbs, circle it. There are a ton of body parts mentioned. Of getting ridiculously practical about how we can engage bodily when it comes to pursuing wisdom. In fact, let me get even more ridiculously practical here. Proverbs says that we can determine if you are wise or a foolish person in what you do in these 6 areas of your life. They are bodily. Your time, your tongue, your money, your friends, your responses, and your genitals. In fact, let's look at this next slide here. Next slide. When you think about this litmus test of Proverbs, the first one is the investment of your time. What do you do with your time? Do you waste it? Do you invest it? Are you lazy? Or do you make the most of it? Do you work hard? How do you spend your time? The time that God has given you. How do you use your tongue? Do you speak to bless other people with the right motive, or are your words violent? Do they add noise to an already noisy, foolish world? How do you steward your resources? Do you waste money frivolously, or do you invest it wisely? How about the relationships that you keep? I remember in high school being a part of a great youth group. Didn't remember much, but I remember one day a guy by the name of John Keebler, former cop in Miami, came in and spoke. He wasn't a very good speaker, but he said this one line that stuck with me even to this day. He said, "You show me your friends, I'll show you your future." Never forgot it. Proverbs tells us the same thing. The relationships that you keep, right? You've heard this, that the 5 people you spend the most time with will probably be the greatest indicator of your future. You show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And Proverbs says what we do, even with the other bodies around us, matter. But your response to feedback and criticism will also say a lot. Is accountability a good word or a cuss word for you? Do you become defensive, or are you receptive when you receive feedback? Do you flip out when you're criticized, or do you receive it without any unhealthy emotional response? And then lastly, how you steward your sexuality. Do you allow your glands and your hormones to decide how you live, or will you allow the principles and obedience to Jesus to guide your sexuality? Wisdom is body-oriented. Take a quick assessment in this litmus test. How are you doing in these 6 areas when it comes to pursuing wisdom? Maybe you think about asking your roommate or your RA or your best friend or significant other, how do you think I'm doing in these areas? Nobody drifts into a life of wisdom. It must be valued. It must be pursued. So how do I pursue wisdom? Some of you may be saying, okay, I'm beginning to see what you're saying, JR, that this is really important for me as a college student right now to be able to pursue wisdom. So how do I pursue it? Again, wisdom is this active pursuit rather than just coming upon us through osmosis or in this passive posture. We've got to actively pursue it in our journey with Jesus. What are some ways? I want to give you just a few of these. I'm not trying to sound like Tony Robbins. This isn't self-help, but I want to just encourage you and give you some tools and be ridiculously practical about how you can enter into this idea of pursuing intentional pursuit of wisdom with God. This is one of the regrets of my time attending a Christian college, that I didn't take wisdom seriously. I wouldn't say I was overly foolish, but I wished that I had spent time thinking through the value of wisdom from Proverbs 3 and 4 and actually wanting to pursue it. The first one we've touched on already, and that's, you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Proverbs 13:20 says, walk with the wise and become wise. Walk with the wise, become wise. Surrounding yourself with wise people will radically shape who you become, and it will also shape who others become as well. So who are those people around you? Who do you surround yourself with? Who influences you? What do you laugh at? The second thing I want to encourage you as college students to think through is to read. Now, I know you have so many reading assignments. It's hard to read for fun. It's hard to read to be stretched outside of what's required of you. But I want to encourage you to read as a form of a spiritual practice of cultivating wisdom. Doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be super deep, doesn't even have to be unenjoyable. But I want to encourage you to be a person of depth. To be a person that's actively loving God fully with your mind. And you're doing that in your classes, which is wonderful. But are there other ways that you could read and press in? There's always 3 types of reading that you can engage in. There's comfort us type reading, there's grow us type reading, and there's disrupt us type reading. What would it look like if you just took a little step forward of looking for the types of reading that will grow you and even disrupt you as a form of your own growth and faith? And of course, study the scriptures. And if you don't know where to start and you want to pursue this, Proverbs is a wonderful place to start. James is what's called the Proverbs of the New Testament. I was named after the book of James. my dad's favorite book of the Bible. And he named me that as a way of challenging me that I would pursue wisdom throughout my lifetime. Now, some of you say, okay, well, Proverbs is great. If you want a challenge on this, let me get down a little bit more granular. If you're really serious about this in the next few days, I want to encourage you to read Proverbs 8 and 9. Here's the really cool thing about the poetic nature of the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 8 talks about wisdom like a woman, Lady Wisdom, calling out on the street corners of Broad and Main, saying, come follow me. I have lots of treasures for you of great value. Inviting us in to follow Lady Wisdom. And then in Proverbs 9 is the opposite. It's Lady Folly, Lady Foolishness, who's calling out and saying, no, follow me instead. In your life, you've got these two women. You've got Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly that are calling out. Who will you follow? I encourage you to dig into that. Or you may say, and I've done this for years as well, to read one proverb a day, right? 31 proverbs, most months, 31 months, or 31 days in each month, right? Just read the proverb on the corresponding day. Today, February 13th, read Proverbs 13. Tomorrow, read Proverbs 14. And you just don't know where to start. You want to cultivate wisdom? Just read through it prayerfully, thoughtfully, and say, Jesus, what do you got for me today? I want to pursue godly wisdom in what you're doing. Another thing I want to encourage you to think through is to never trade the most important for the immediate or the appealing. There's so many temptations, not even sinful temptations, but temptations nonetheless to distract you and to keep you from pursuing what is most important. Wisdom is a crock-pot meal in a microwave world. It's going to take patience on our part to be able to wait not just for instant gratification, but for what's most important. You've got to take the long game approach. I love the Olympics. My wife and I used to live in Colorado Springs. I was pastoring a young adult congregation, and we had several Olympic athletes who were part of our ministry. The first wedding I ever did was an Olympic pentathlete marrying an Olympic triathlete. Kind of cool. And on Tuesday nights, I was asked to join the athletes at the training table at the U.S. Olympic Center and then lead a study on the book of Romans for a year with these athletes. And one of the things that I noticed, have you ever noticed the difference between Olympic sprinters' bodies and Olympic marathoners' bodies? Right? Olympic sprinters' bodies, huge, hulking, amazing specimens, right? These sprints, that's what we tune in for on the Olympics when it comes to the Summer Olympics races, right? But if you've ever been around marathoners, they can run forever, but they're not ripped, right? They're gangly and lanky. And we live in a world that loves sprinters when it comes to wisdom or what we think is most important. But actually, we need to be the kinds of people that actually, when we're pursuing wisdom, have more of a marathoner's body. It's a long-term approach. This is what wisdom is like if we're to pursue it well. Foolish people are only looking to the immediate, never pausing to reflect long-term on the implications of their thoughts and their actions. As long as it makes me feel good now, in the moment, that's all that matters. But that's not how wise people think. It's not how godly people who want to live the with God life, it's not how they think. Which means we've got to also reflect. Half of education is reflection. Half of your education is reflection. And for some of you, that may mean journaling. If you're not into journaling, it's okay. There's no commandment that says thou shalt journal. Jesus never journaled. You don't have to journal. But if it's helpful for you, as it has been for me, feel free to engage in that reflection. Spending time in silence. The number one factor that keeps you from reflecting is your phone. Now, I love my phone, but there are times where I must be away from my phone because my phone is luring me in to only remain on the surface. There's a little thing that phone developers have created It's a little pretty cool symbol, especially on the iPhone. You pull it down, it kind of looks like an airplane, but it's actually a spiritual depth little button. You press that, and you actually are left alone. And you don't have to be on an airplane to press that button, you know? You can press that anytime you want. Our phones are great. But to pursue a life of depth, we also need time away from our phones. It's hard to reflect when we're constantly being reminded of breaking news or this new post on TikTok or this new feed or this new whatever, fill in the blank. I'm not a Luddite. I don't belong to an Amish community. I'm not telling you to get rid of your phone. But I am wanting to encourage you to live a life of depth where you spend intentional, purposeful time away from it so you can reflect. My sons are 16 and almost 13. And when they were 10, I had the talk with them. And I started by saying this. I said, is fire good or bad? And I said, it's good. It depends. And I said, exactly. There are a lot of things in life where it's neither good nor bad on the surface. It depends. And it takes a lot of wisdom for us to be able to navigate if it's good or bad, right? Fire in my fireplace, giving us warmth and a nice glow and fun together as a family around the fire is great, but when that log rolls out of the fireplace and all over the rug and starts burning the house down, it's bad. Fire in the right place, it depends. And we need time to be able to reflect to say, Jesus, what do you want? When it comes to all sorts of things, how can I navigate this well? I want to encourage you to, when it comes to your time, don't spend your time, invest it. There are people that waste time, there are people that spend time, and there are people that invest time. I want to encourage you to be the kind of person that actually invests time. I was talking with a leader here at Gordon at lunchtime today, and she was recommending to a student about taking an audit, a time audit. That might be a really good thing for you to do, to just say, where is my time going? Am I investing my one and only life in the things that truly matter? Your time matters. I would hate for you to get to the end of your 4 years and go, I wasted so much time. Instead of saying, I invested it in this with God life that we're talking about. I want to encourage you to commit to only dating others who clearly evidence a life of wisdom. People that are actually pursuing wisdom. Intelligence, influence, beauty, strength, they have some value. But they should never be the deciding factors of who you pursue. Set your standards on the bare minimum of 2 questions. Is Christ central to their lives, and does this person exhibit wisdom in their lives? Make that commitment. Nothing less than that, students. That's for your good and theirs. Seek out mentors and older spiritual friends who exhibit a life of wisdom. Who are the people that when you think about at your church or on campus, you say, they're wise? Could be an upperclassman, could be a faculty or staff member, could be a pastor or a couple that's sitting a few rows behind you in church on Sunday morning. But be proactive and just say, you know what? I'd love to just get to know you a little bit more. I'd love to learn from you. I see wisdom in your life, and I want to learn how you've cultivated that. Ask yourself significant questions that wise people ask themselves, like, is what I'm about to say or do wise? Would Jesus be honored in this decision or not? Does this honor others around me, including those closest to me? Will this decision matter in 5 days or 5 months or 5 years or 5 decades from now or in eternity? Will I ever regret this decision And what's my motive? Students, I want to encourage you to pursue depth over speed. We live in a culture that's obsessed with progress. Live a life of depth. It's the best way you can invest your one and only life in the things of God. And I want to encourage you to pray for it. You ever thought about praying for wisdom? James 1:5. If you know it, great. If you don't, I want to encourage you to memorize it. It says this: if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously and without finding fault, and he will do it. When I'm in situations, I go, God, I have no idea what to do right now. God, I'm so confused. God, I need to do the right thing, and I don't even know what that is. Give me wisdom. I think James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, God, that's me right now. God, I'm lacking wisdom. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously and faultlessly, and he will do it. Take God up on his promise. He's daring us to ask him for more wisdom. You don't know what to do? Ask. Ask. And pray that you don't use your own wisdom for your own benefit and glory, but pray that you use that wisdom to honor God. One brief thing I want to just mention here, and that's this idea of adversity. I think one of the best ways that we can grow in wisdom is what happens during hardship and suffering. I've noticed the difference between those who are wise and those who are unwise is in the difference of the questions that they ask during hardship. During earlier immature years of my life, when something bad would happen, I would say, "Why, God, why? How could you let this happen to me?" And I'm growing slowly to ask with more maturity when things like that happen, to say, "Okay, Lord, this isn't fun. What's the invitation from you to deepen my trust?" I want to encourage you to think through the types of questions you ask in the midst of hardship or adversity or uncertainty. The questions you ask, the quantity and the quality of the questions you ask of yourself, of God, and others will determine the quality of your life. But more than anything, students, look to Jesus, the very embodiment of God in this wisdom himself. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' manifesto for life in the kingdom, found in the biography of Jesus, written by Matthew 5, 6, and 7. He talks about the fork in the road that we have between being wise and unwise. The way of foolishness, he said, is super wide. It's paved and it's super crowded. There's a lot of people on that. But the way of Jesus, the way of wisdom and life is narrow and it's difficult and it's not frequently traveled. Be the kinds of students who take that path. And Jesus gave a mini visual teaching of it in Matthew 7 at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. He said this: "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise person who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had as its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish person who built their house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash." I was teaching in San Diego about 5 years ago to a room full of pastors. And there were about 50, 60 pastors in there. And right in the middle of it, someone's cell phone rang. He picked up and answered it and kind of rushed out of the room. I thought, man, that sounds kind of urgent. That was quite loud. Just a moment later, someone else ran back in the room and gathered all of this person's belongings up, gathered him up with his backpack, his bag, all of his stuff, kind of loud, and sprinted out of the room. And we paused and we said, is everything okay? We found out later that this gentleman who received the call just learned that his nephew had died in the California mudslides. And he had just received that call. This is what happens when we hear the words of Jesus, but we don't actually do it. This is what Jesus says happens. That instead of the posts of Lindisfarne to guide us in the way, when the waters rise, there's a mudslide that comes and wipes us out. Be the kinds of people that when tragedy strikes, you're held solidly because you've chosen to live a life of intentional pursuit of godly wisdom. You will never regret the intentional pursuit of wisdom, students, ever. Run after that. Long to grow into maturity to the point that other people look at you and say, that woman, she is so wise. That man, he is pursuing God's heart and actively engaging in wisdom. Wisdom is so essential in the life of Christ and life with Christ. You can change a generation by being wise. You can bring healing and hope and life to people when you're wise. You can change a residence hall, a classroom, a party, a team, a roommate by being wise. You can change your potential future marriage, your future children, your future grandchildren by seeking a life of wisdom. You can change your life. You can save your life. You can experience true life by pursuing wisdom. And the question is this, students: will you live a life of your impulses, your urges, your preferences, your glands, and your hormones, or will you live by the guidance of God's desire for your life? Wisdom in our culture may not seem very sexy, but it is the way in which we engage with God in the with God life. I hope you'll believe me, but I hope more importantly that you will believe the words of Jesus. You will believe the words of Proverbs 3 and 4 and what it has to say about the intentional pursuit of godly wisdom. Students, you will never regret the intentional pursuit of godly wisdom. Your one and only life that you have. You don't have to wait till you're old. You don't have to wait till your brother gives you a nose hair trimmer and you get excited about it. You can do it right now. You can pursue it right now. And I have been praying for you all that wisdom will become so attractive to you all in your pursuit of Jesus. That this campus, that people even outside of this campus would say, there are wise students pursuing the heart of God in what they're doing on that campus at Gordon College. So let's pray. Jesus, we know that you call us to a life of wisdom, but the cards are stacked against us because we live in a culture that says that foolishness is more exciting and more fun and more gratifying in the short term. But I pray you'd give us the faith and the insight and the trust to be able to take you at your word that wisdom is greater than gold and silver and more precious than rubies. Lord, give us a distaste in our mouth for things that are foolish. Give us an allergic reaction to things that only remain on the surface or are temporary. Give us a mind, give us a heart, give us a spirit that runs after the things that you run after. And that people may say, not for our glory, but for yours, that they may say, that man, that woman is pursuing a life of wisdom. And help us to see now, give us faith now here in February 2023, that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future, that we will say, I never regretted pursuing intentional godly wisdom. Lord, you say in James 1:5 we can ask for it. So I'm going to ask on behalf of my sisters and brothers here that you would give us wisdom, not for our own sake, but for yours. Give us wisdom generously. Give it faultlessly. May people come to faith because they see godly wisdom exemplified in our lives. Help us to love it and pursue it in all that we do. And it's in the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. Amen. Gordon, you are dispersed. Enjoy your night.